This is Cheryl Todd of Gun Freedom Radio.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd, reminding you that we and the show you are listening to are proud members of the Self-Defense Radio Network.
Find out more and check out all of the other great shows and content at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, living proof that without practice, there's no limit to how little you can accomplish, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. This is a podcast about the men and women who compete in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, I've been attending IDPA matches since 2011, and over the years, I've met some really amazing people thanks to this sport. Ignore all the colorful jerseys and the sponsor logos, and underneath you're going to find everyday men and women who volunteer their time and their effort and spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. And today you're going to meet another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. I want to take a minute to talk about our good friends at Cook's Holsters. When I first got started in concealed carry, I really didn't know what I was doing. I picked out one of those cheap prophylactic holsters that collapse when you draw the gun out. Yeah, I know, I was one of those guys. But then I started learning more. I took some classes, I read books, I watched videos, and I found out about the advantage of Kydex. And that's how I discovered Cook's Holsters. What makes Cook's Holsters special? Well, they're an American success story for one thing. Born in the founder's basement, Cook's Holsters grew so much that the owner left his job, his full-time job, to make holsters full-time, and then expanded and hired people because he had to have help to fill orders and meet demand. They even sell printed Kydex to many of the other holster makers, and their subsidiary business, Cook's Molds, actually makes the molds that many of those other holster makers use to make their products. Custom molded to fit your firearm, Cook's Holsters are available for carry, for range work, for competition. I use them every day. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and save 15% off your order at cooksholsters.com. Our special guest today, joining us from our first Nevadan, it's Jeffrey Yerger from Las Vegas, Nevada. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Lloyd. Thank you very much for having me. Totally excited to do this.
Well, I'm happy that you're here. I appreciate it. I got a recommendation to have you on the show, and I needed somebody to represent the great state of Nevada, and I'm excited that you're the one. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living there in Las Vegas. Okay,
well, I've been here in Las Vegas since December of '96 when I got off active duty in the military. My jobs I currently do, my main job is I'm an executive protection agent. And so I provide personal security for people, property, companies, and things like that. I'm also an instructor for Tactical Perfomance Center based out of St. George, Utah. Our president, Ken Nelson, and director of training, the late Ron Avery, who just passed away a few months ago.
All right. What branch of the service?
I was in the Army.
Okay.
Spent 4 years in the infantry.
Well, thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much.
What was the interest in joining the military? Why sign up originally?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, at the time, after high school, I did a little bit of traveling to Michigan and Virginia, and so I kind of felt I was in a little rut. And so I'm kind of like, hey, I need to do something that's a challenge to myself. And so I figured, hey, I want to join the military, following the footsteps of my grandfather and also my father, who were both in the Army as well. And so it just seemed like a natural track for me to be on.
Gotcha. So you said you've been in Nevada for, about 22 years now. Where did you move from? Where were you from originally?
Originally grew up in Illinois. First, as a young child, grew up in the suburbs. And then from there, I actually moved into the city of Chicago. Graduated from a high school called Senn Metropolitan Academy. After I graduated, there. Then, as I said, I moved to Michigan and Virginia, then went to military, and then I spent all my active duty time overseas in Germany. And so when I came back from Germany in 96, my dad's like, hey, if you want to come check Vegas out, I got a free place to stay and I got a car for you. So, someone freshly out the military, what else do you need to hear? Right. And so I made my way to Vegas, and it seemed to be a pretty good move for me.
So growing up behind enemy lines, as it were, in Illinois and in Chicago, of all places, where did the interest in guns come from? Were you around them or introduced to them at a young age, or was it the military where you were introduced to firearms?
Funny enough, I was really interested in firearms at a very young age, probably because of what I saw on TV, just a fan of certain shows, back in the day, like Car 54, Where Are You, the original SWAT, growing up watching Miami Vice. And so I had a great fascination with firearms at a very young age. My uncles in neighboring Indiana were professional hunters, and they were avid shooters. And so when I'd go to visit, I was always around firearms. And then my parents saw at a very young age that I had this interest. And so my dad's like, hey, if you're going to have interest in firearms, I'm going to show you how to do it the right way and not, so to say, grow up learning how to shoot based off what you see on TV. And so he introduced me to actually shooting firearms at a very young age. And from there, the fascination just grew. And then once I joined the military, then it was just like, it was drool time. Now I had access to all the firearms that I see on TV and the movies, and it's like, oh my God! And I get unlimited ammo too, and so it was just a match made in heaven.
There you go. So about 4 years after you get to Nevada, you join IDPA. What was the introduction to competitive shooting? How did you learn about it, and how did you get involved?
Funny enough, I just happened to go to a local outdoor range. I became a member. And then so, freshly out the military, not freshly, but wanting to be proficient with the firearms, because I got introduced to the security industry very quickly after I got out of the military in Las Vegas. And so I just wanted to be a better shot with my duty firearms. So I went to an outdoor range, and I start seeing people running around with firearms in their hands. And so, it's like, what's that? And so first I recognized a match. It was called Paladin, which is the pseudo beginning of a 3-gun match. And then I learned about USPSA, and I jumped feet first into that. Then I saw another match called IDPA. And so being from someone in the military, you always have this big ego. And so I thought I was a good shooter because I can go to an indoor range and do these very small groups at, 7 yards. Like, oh, man, I must be the man. And then go and try some of these competitive matches. And I'm like, whoa, how could I miss that target that's only 3 yards away? And so you kind of have two type of people where it's like, man, I need to know what these people are doing to make them better, so much better than I am. Or you have the other half of people where it's like, oh, you guys are just a bunch of gamers and it has no practical application to reality. And then you never see them again. So luckily I was in option A. I'm like, I need to know how these people are crushing me, and I need that skill because I saw the benefit to what I did for a living in the security realm.
Right.
And so that was pretty much how I got introduced to competitive sports, especially IDPA, is I just happened to see it. I've never heard of the sport, any competitive sport, before I actually saw it when I moved to Las Vegas.
Do you remember the first local match there in Las Vegas, the first local IDPA match? I do. I do. I remember it very fondly. Because, like I said, I was nervous, but I had an ego to hold me up a little bit, and so I didn't know anybody there, and so I was down in the lineup, and here comes my time to shoot. And starting out, I had all of the speed. I was very fast, but I had absolutely no control. And so it was apparent in my score and apparent on the targets. And so it was a big humble pie to eat. And so it's like, man, I'm like, it must be the gun.
the gun must be broke, or the sights must be off. But, I just going to competitive matches, it's where I also got introduced not only to the sport, but the type of people that compete in these matches. And so I had a number of people just come up to me and offer me friendly advice, not telling me how to shoot, but just offer me friendly advice, hey, everyone starts as a scrub. No one is coming out for the first match or a competitive sport as a DM, so once I learned that, it's like, okay, I'm going to keep coming back and apply what I've been told, what I see, apply that to my training and see how I do.
So how long after that before you decided to try your hand at a sanctioned match and really step up with a different class of shooters?
Oh, it was a while. It was a while because we had a really good local match in Vegas, and so back then, I was shooting my duty firearm. So I think my first firearm was HK USP in 9mm, and so I was doing that going to school. So I really never heard of hey, let's travel for a match. And so I was just pretty much shot locally. And so I think my first out-of-town match might have been 2014, 2015.
Oh, wow.
And so, so it was quite a while before I actually ventured out of the home club.
What was your classification by the time 2014 rolled around and you decided to take that step? And where was the first sanctioned match, and what do you remember of that day?
I think by then I was already a master in SSP.
Okay.
And so I believe it was a match in Arizona. I don't recall what it was called. It was probably in Prescott.
Okay.
And I just remember because that was the first range I've been on for a match that was my home club. And so I was just thinking like, wow, this is a pretty big range that nobody driving by would ever see. And the terrain was very different from Las Vegas, where it's mostly dirt, smooth dirt in Prescott, where in Vegas I had to deal with a lot of rocks. The most dangerous part of shooting competitive sports at the Vegas club was taping a target and twisting an ankle, stepping on a rock, versus worried about another shooter with a firearm. So I just remember in Prescott that the terrain was really nice to run on.
So at this point, you're a what some people would call a paper master because you'd gotten there through classifiers, but you'd been shooting local matches you had lots of prep going into this. What do you remember of that day? What was that day like?
I remember there was a nervousness there because, when you look on registration, and of course I didn't really know any other shooters outside of my club, but you see classifications. That's what, you look at the squad list. You don't care about the name. You just want to see what division they're shooting and the classification. And so as I was shooting stock service pistol, I'm looking forward to see how many other masters I'm going to be competing against. And there were quite a few. And so I felt this kind of anxiousness to say, okay, let's go ahead and start this. I want to see how I stack up against other people from wherever they are, wherever their home clubs are. And so for me, by that time, I wanted to shoot with anybody who can beat me. That's who I needed to shoot with, because I needed to see how they're training, what they're doing, how they're able to, shred a few seconds off of my time in terms of how they move, how they manipulate the course. And so by that time the match came around, I was all in. I wanted to shoot with anyone who was possibly better than me or at my same skill level, just to see how I matched up.
Right.
And I think in that match, I probably finished about maybe third or fourth master. And so I was happy with it. But then, it's short-lived. The whole ride home back to Las Vegas. Oh man, I gave up X amount of seconds doing this, or I got this crazy procedural that that I don't think I should have gotten. So you start playing, that what if game for that 4-hour drive home. and so it just kind of made me go back to the drawing board and say, okay, this is what I need to work on. And so luckily I had people that I could rely on and that were very impactful in terms of my shooting that really helped me get to the next level.
Since that first sanctioned match, have you got a memory, something fun or interesting from another sanctioned match you've shot in the 5 years now since that first sanctioned match? Oh
boy, there've been a lot. A lot of ups, a lot of downs. It's funny because I've been able to win quite a few matches, but the ones that stick in my head are the downs, are the ones that I didn't win. Because I can attribute them like, oh, I was an idiot, or I let my ego get in the way. For instance, shooting a stage, there was a certain way to shoot it, but I figured out, okay, well, if I do this, it would make it harder for me, but I should play it safe and shoot it the same way everyone else is shooting. But here comes that ego. I bet I can do that, X amount of faster by shooting it the more difficult way. And so I would shoot it that way just to prove myself that I could. And of course I did, but it was kind of to my detriment. Because
go big or go home kind of thing.
Exactly. And I wish I could say that only happened once, but that little voice always jumps in my head. I wonder if you can hit that popper 2 statics and then come back for that clamshell. And so, that little angel and devil jump up on my shoulders. And so sometimes it's to my great detriment that I listen to the wrong one.
All right. So you're a master. We talked right before we started recording. We talked about the fact that you're an SSP guy. What firearm do you compete with?
Now I compete with a CZ SP01 Shadow 1.
Okay.
That is my current SSP. Since I started IDPA, I think by the time 2011 rolled around, probably a lot earlier than that, I had switched to a Glock 34. And so that was a gun that I got good with. I had to use a gun that also doubled as my duty gun for my security work. And so I was rocking a Glock 34. And probably about 3 years ago is when I got my first introduction to metal frame 9mm. And it was like, wow, I've been missing out. and so I got my hands on a used SP01 Shadow.
Okay. Well, let's play a little pick your poison here. A little something I added because the early guests on the show were kind of getting complacent with their answers. They'd listen to a few episodes and they'd be like, okay, I know what you're going to ask me. I'm all set. If you couldn't shoot the Glock 34 and you couldn't shoot your CZ, you couldn't shoot in SSP in that division. What division interests you that you think you would find interesting?
I think then I would go to CDP. I have a couple of 45s, and I by no means am a 1911 aficionado or run it all that well. I can shoot any gun, but when it comes to the 1911, really the reloads will differentiate between shooters. And I think if you can, I've seen shooters that I shoot with at big matches, such as Walt and Austin Prue. They can reload a 1911 as fast as I can load a Glock.
Right.
And on my metal, on my CZs and my tank folios, I still can't do a reload as fast with those guns as I can a Glock. And they're doing that with a 1911.
Yep.
So I'm like, wow.
Yep.
I would love to be able to shoot the CDP with those guys if that's what I had to go to.
Gotcha. If you had to choose shooting a standard stage, first stage of the match or last, which would you choose in a major match?
Wow, that's a good question. I think last. That'd be my preference. I would prefer to shoot I think my strong suits are stages that have movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think by the time that I get to that standard stage, I'm already on cruise control. I'm warmed up. I'm hot, and I kind of have that attitude where whatever you're going to throw in my way, I'm ready to crush.
Right.
And so but on the flip side, most of the matches I've gone to where they've thrown out some type of static stage is usually on stage number 1.
Right.
and sometimes I've had some success, but other times the run that I envisioned in my head was not repeated performance-wise.
Right.
And so like I said, if I had a choice, I would like to do that last. But
yeah,
that's why we're paying shooters. We just don't have a choice in the matter.
Right. MDs seem to think nowadays that a stand and deliver stage at the beginning of the match is a warm-up. I'm not sure exactly how that's supposed to help.
Exactly. That's a good way to kind of envision. I'd rather warm up on the run and on the go, where we have a nice field course, versus, hey, let me warm up on this headshot at 15 yards, and that kind of sets the tone for everything else. Luckily, I've been shooting for so long that if I have a bad stage, I can brush it off my shoulder. I'm good to go for the next stage. Shooting, it happens.
Right.
I've seen other shooters throughout the years where they have a bad stage on stage 1, and it carries all the way to stage 12.
Yeah.
And so your mental focus is just as important as your performance with that firearm, knowing how to operate that firearm subconsciously in case, Mr. Murphy jumps up and you get a malfunction or that magazine falls out or something happens. And so that's just part of the game.
Yep.
How you approach it mentally.
Worst malfunction you ever had happen in the middle of a stage?
Well, worst malfunction. This was not at an IDPA match. It was at a USPSA match in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so here I am with my trusty Glock 34. First day, first stage, first shooter. And so I'm shooting the course of fire. And back then, I was loading my own ammunition on that day to my detriment, and I had a double charge.
Oh.
And so I shot that gun. My magazine came out very, very fast. my slide popped off the gun unexpectedly, and basically the gun blew up in my hand. After that, I was pretty intent on making sure of what I was doing when I was around that reloader.
Yep. We talked about the weather in Nevada for it's coming up on, won't be long before you're running into triple digits as of this recording. Which do you prefer? Cold, like 30 degrees, or triple digits at a match?
I'll take the heat.
Okay.
If those are my choices, I will definitely take the heat. When it's cold, you're just miserable. Just a different type of miserable comes over you. And so when it's hot, it's hot. You can dress for that to a degree. Being in Las Vegas for as long as I have, I just kind of deal with it.
Right.
I've shot in rain, sleet, snow, hail, windstorms. We have some pretty strong wind storms here in Las Vegas, and also the triple-digit temperatures. And just one of those things, if you want to shoot, you got to shoot. If it's hot, it's just hot.
Right.
Hopefully we just start early. But yeah, that's been my experience. When it's cold, it's like, man, it's like, yeah, just a whole new level of suck.
Yeah, exactly.
When it's cold. So yeah, definitely the heat.
Now, these two skills are tough especially for new shooters to master, and they can screw up a match for you pretty quick. Which do you prefer, shooting on the move or shooting moving targets?
I would say shooting on the move. Shooting moving targets is a lot of fun as well, but shooting on the move is just such an important skill that transcends just the game of competitive shooting, especially as it relates to in the security world, which I'm in. If bullets happen to be coming your way, you want to be anywhere in the world other than where that gun is pointed at.
Right.
And so if I can have that skill to engage my targets while I'm moving, makes myself a harder target to hit. I think that's a much more valuable skill. Now, when we talk about the game, if you add movement and you're able to hit what you're aiming at, now that's just going to shrink your overall time considerably.
Right.
Even if you're a person that has trouble with moving targets, whether it be a swinging target, a clamshell, plate racks, Texas Stars, what have you, even if you shoot that static, but then you can start moving after you get rid of that, that's still going to reduce your overall time.
Right.
And so I think just to have that skill on shooting on the move is just totally invaluable.
Right. As
it relates to the game, life, or whatever else you want to apply it to.
Last one before the final fun question. What part of your game at this point in your career would you say is your strong suit? What's your strength? And which part of your game would you say you still feel like you need the most improvement?
I think one of my strong suits is my stage planning, executing my stage plan. And, many people will tell you, if you shoot on a squad with me, I'm known to ask the RO or the RO or / SO a lot of questions. And so I might think of something that maybe other competitors haven't, just because they kind of see, hey, this is the written stage brief. This is how it must be shot. But I think in my time, in my years of being a dual sport competitor versus IDPA and USPSA, I've picked up a lot of, hey, if I can see it, I should be able to do it, unless there's a rule that says that I can't. And so I think my stage planning is a huge asset to me.
Okay.
In terms of my weaknesses, and this is something that I've been struggling with forever, is my ability to fire the gun as soon as I want to when I'm aimed at a target. And if you look at a camera, it may not seem that there is any lag, but sometimes mentally I can draw the gun at the target and I see the front sight in the zone that I want the rounds to go. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you not pulling the trigger? So that's something that I continually practice on in my own game at different distances, because I want that gun to fire as soon as I'm at my natural extension for the draw, or sooner, depending on how close that target is.
Gotcha.
So, but that's why I love these games so much. There's never a shortage of something to work on.
Right.
And every time I come away from a big match, I'm like, I need to spend time doing this. I need to spend time doing that. And luckily, I've been at some of these big matches where the match directors have been very creative in bringing things about that. Like, man, I just didn't think about that. And then, it's on the way home to Vegas, you're thinking, okay, back to the drawing board. I got to do that in case I see it again.
Right. Well, as we wrap this up, what is it? You've been doing this for, what has it been? Almost 19 years now. What is it about IDPA that you love so much? What is it that is special about the sport for you? You also shoot, like you mentioned, you shoot USPSA, but what is it that keeps you coming back to IDPA and that you love so much?
IDPA is just a different breed of shooting altogether, separate from USPSA, where USPSA is kind of like what I call run and gun. IDPA is more strategic, if you will. There's just more to think about in terms of cover and mag changes, or retaining mags, or how to manipulate a stage so you can just do a slide lock reload. So I think there's more thought that goes into running a stage for me for IDPA versus the other sports. And I think it relates more closely toward just my mindset. And I kind of go in phases. Sometimes I might shoot other organizations, but IDPA has always been a mainstay. I've always shot it since I've joined in 2000, and I've never taken a break from it. And so it just offers a different perspective on how to shoot the firearm. And it's a challenge to myself. And so I just want to, find the hardest thing out there and crush it. And so for me, it's just a never-ending journey. I want to be the best shooter that I can be, no matter what discipline that I'm shooting. And I've met some awesome people in this organization, from management all the way down, from master directors, from fellow shooters, who I make it a point to squad up with when I'm shooting matches, because they have the same type of mindset that I do. When I go to a match, I don't want to just win SSP. I want to win the match. Now, even though IDPA doesn't have an overall winner like some other organizations, it just makes it so much more enjoyable and challenging when you shoot with people who have similar mindsets. And so I think some of the changes that IDPA has done have greatly improved the sport, such as fault line.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope they continue the trend of making this match, these matches, much more enjoyable and a lot easier to officiate.
Right.
And I think IDPA still has a lot of work to do in that regard, but I do think that they're on the right track.
Good deal. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Thank you for your service. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to an opportunity to squad with you in a match sometime down the road. I'd look forward to that.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Well, thank you so very much. Like I say, I appreciate your podcast. Thank you for doing what you do, to giving a venue, and for shooters that only shoot at the local clubs, learn about other shooters that are around the country. So I just love the sport. So, hey, if you're ever at a range somewhere and you see me, please don't hesitate to come up to me. I'd love to talk to anybody.
Awesome.
And hopefully we will be able to squad up soon. That'd be great.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show and our sponsors for making all of this possible. Take a moment, if you would, to check out the website, check out our show notes at unloadpodcast.com. We've got lots of interviews with more amazing guests like the one you heard today. Join our Facebook group at unloadpodcast.com/Facebook for all the latest updates and to connect with other fans of the show. And if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. Consider becoming a patron at unloadpodcast.com/extra. I've got some full-length interviews and special content available there exclusively for patrons as well. And if you know somebody or you yourself would make an interesting guest for a future episode of Unload and Show Clear, please contact me at lloyd@unloadpodcast.com or click on the contact page on the website and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.